So, Marina, my first request is you need to start this video podcast thing with.
How do you feel about Billy's relationship with Max in season 2? What's your impression?
In episode 1, Billy basically driving Max to school, and they don't say bye to each other. So the relationship from the very beginning is not exactly a loving relationship. And then it escalates very quickly to when Billy drives Max home from school, and Billy's verbally abusive to Max. And then Billy does this crazy thing with the car where he's speeding and almost runs over Mike, Dustin, and Lucas on bikes.
Yeah.
Although the scaring the friends thing is a little bit of a sense of humor of Billy. It's a very dark sense of humor because he was never going to run them over.
Isn't it also just reckless endangerment at the
Oh, it
same
is
time,
reckless
though?
endangerment, and if he did run him over, it would be, he'd go to jail for a long time. But that's like the difference between like a prank gone wrong and a prank gone not wrong. Because at the end of the day, there's no harm done.
But I mean, at the same time, that experience, I think, sticks with the person for a very long time. Not just for
Oh yeah.
Max of the fear, because I think that given their relationship, she could reasonably think that he's crazy enough to do it, or at least seriously injure them. And then to the boys, like they were about to be run over. That
Yeah,
that
yeah.
is
I mean,
horrifying
listen,
to
it's definitely not ideal Big Brother behavior. In episode 4 of season 2, it goes to Billy being really concerned about Max speaking to Lucas. But it seems like there's a racist angle there too. I don't think it's exactly subtle either. I think it's pretty obvious. What it is interesting is it shows the protective brother.
So that scene is interesting, or I mean, it's not just one scene, but the multiple scenes. The
Yeah,
funny thing is that the Duffer brothers did confirm that it is because Billy's racist, but it is too subtle. And it is kind of too subtle in the show because there are so many people that were asking that question of why does Billy hate Lucas?
but at the end of the day, that's him being protective.
But
Yeah.
the thing is like he's not actually being protective. We haven't seen an example, any other single example where he's been protective that it's not tied to him being racist.
Some people are protective in an aggressive, physical, angry way. There are glimmers of Billy caring for Max, and he shows his care in weird ways and aggressive ways, but he definitely cares about her.
Apart from the very final scene in season 3, I don't see any signs of Billy being protective. The only time that he's quote unquote protective is when he's threatening her for talking to someone who is black. That's not protective.
Before he's under Vecna's control, he does not try to hurt really Max in any real form.
But the thing is, like, abuse is not just physical. The amount of verbal abuse that he put her through is, I would say, very serious psychological harm. He makes an effort to hurt her. Like, he makes a conscious effort.
Yeah, I interpreted what you said with hurt as physical. My
Yeah.
next thing is episode 8, and this is where Billy's dad, Neil, and his wife, Susan, they discover that Max is gone, and Billy basically gets physically and verbally abused by his dad. I mean, so in relation to Billy and Max with that scene, what I took away from that is it answered a lot of questions about Billy's behavior. It shows where the protection comes from. It comes from a place of self-preservation rather than necessarily caring.
That scene is really good for showing. I mean, we have an earlier scene that explains why he's such a bully to Max by making her say that it's her fault.
You know whose fault it is. Say it.
Combined with this scene is just showing that he's extra hard on Max because he resents her. He is bullying her and he's constantly abusing her because he feels it is her fault. And he resents the fact that he has to look after her. You know, like he didn't want this life, he didn't want this sister. And now there's this girl in his house that he's responsible for looking after and he doesn't want her there. So naturally, he'd be even more abusive towards her because then he gets more abused by her existence. Anytime that he's not being responsible looking out for her, his father is even harder on him.
And that was the cool thing about the end of season 2. That's where basically Max hits Billy right after Billy's trying to hurt Lucas. And then Steve comes out, tries to fight Billy. And then Max comes out of nowhere and hits Billy in the head and then plunges that whatever
Syringe.
and
Yeah.
makes him say that he's going to stay away from the friends, and Billy runs away. So that was a nice end to the season because you see Max taking control over an abusive relationship, and taking control over Billy. I thought that season was tied well in the end.
There's a scene where Max talks to Lucas about how her parents got divorced, how they moved to Hawkins, and how Billy was always a dick, but that since they moved, he became even worse. So that he just became angry all the time. So there was at least a slightly different version of Billy before when they were out in California. And the Billy that we're seeing now is just even a next level version where not only is he a dick, but he's just constantly angry. And so we're seeing even worse behavior from him. Also, okay, another thing that I thought was interesting. I mean, this is not surprising either, but it's clear that when they come home, when the parents come home and they see Billy getting ready for a date, the mom also looks scared. She's watching this happen. She's watching Neil, the father, be abusive to Billy, and she's standing there in the corner. And
Yeah.
I get people get into these relationships, but it just makes you think like, wow, even Max's mom is also in this position where she's watching all this abuse happen, and she seems to be afraid of the father as well.
Stepmom. Yeah.
Stepmom, yeah.
It's sad because that's how abuse works. It's generational. You learn the abuse through your parents. And I think I'll be bold to say that the abuse is much more widespread than we think, especially at a more minor degree.
Yeah, which is something that Max also talks about when she's talking to Lucas about how she feels like she's part of this abusive cycle too, because she tells Lucas that, hey, I know I can be a dick sometimes.
Right, right.
And she's saying that, she doesn't want to be like her brother, but she knows that she can be because she's also
Yeah.
growing up in this environment, but she recognizes it in herself. What we see in the flashbacks is also the fact that Billy's mom left him, she abandoned him, which is another level to the trauma. So not only did Billy grow up in an abusive household, but his mom then chose to leave him behind to deal with that abandonment issue of this woman who he loved, who was his caretaker, his mother,
That's terrible.
choosing to leave him. Yeah. Basically, at the beginning of season 3, Billy gets taken by the Mind Flayer, and he's under the Mind Flayer's control. How do you feel about their relationship in season 3?
Well, it definitely gets crazy because he's more extreme. And then there's the sauna scene. The crying in the sauna scene is really sad. So you kind of see the vulnerability and the love come out, but it's under like really duress.
I think that season
What do you
3
think?
is interesting because obviously in season 2, Billy and Max were extra. They didn't really do much for the plot. There were these two characters that were added and their relationship was really not relevant. But in season 3, they become almost a focal point. Their relationship becomes a focal point and it becomes very important. What I liked is how much we learn about Max and how she feels about Billy through this experience. Because as soon as Elle finds out that Billy killed someone when she spied on him and she suspected that he murdered someone, Max right away goes into a defense mode. She goes into denial of saying, no, this couldn't be Billy. Like, I know Billy's a dick, but he wouldn't do this. And she starts defending him. And she keeps doing that for a while, this
Right,
desperate need to defend him.
right.
And she's so worried, which is this element of, we know how abusive he is, but she's still doing that. And there's a scene where she's looking at him as he's working as a lifeguard and she's whispering to herself saying, please don't let it be you. She's so afraid that it's what it is. And in the scene with the sauna, so what I was thinking about is that scene where he starts begging for his life, that made me think about season 2 when Will was under the control of the Mind Flayer and he was under control, but he wasn't under full control. He was still able to do Morse code. So a part of me wonders in that scene in the sauna, I think we're sort of meant to interpret the fact that Billy in that moment is lying because he's grabbing a shard of glass to break the sauna window. But at the same time, what if it is Billy actually coming out and him speaking those things genuinely while at the same time his body is also being controlled to attack?
Yeah,
That there's
that's how I interpreted
yeah.
it.
Do you think that what he does is sufficient to redeem him?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, what he did saved his sister, saved a bunch of other people. If he didn't do what he did, Elle would have died. A whole world would have been controlled by Vecna. It was not only sufficient for Max. If there's any big hero in the show, it's Billy for all 4 seasons.
Yeah, no, I definitely don't see it that way. I think that his redemption came too late. It wasn't enough. I mean, it was something. It was definitely a redeeming moment. And I get what you're saying. Yes, technically, from a technical perspective, he does this heroic act that saves everybody.
In that moment, right? What could he have done more to redeem himself?
From the timeline perspective, it was just too late. In order to redeem himself, he needed to live longer. He needed to not die. One moment does not absolve someone of a lifetime of sin. It is a step towards redemption. But redemption is not a simple journey. It's not something that you just do once. It's something that a person has to keep doing in order to grow. And one moment, it gives a sign of someone who is willing to change. But the thing is that if you put someone in a high stress situation, in those moments when they're begging for forgiveness, begging to be better, or doing something in the interest of becoming better, it's just a sign that what if you take them out of that situation? Are they going to go back to being who they were before, or are they actually going to start changing? That's what we'll never know.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I just don't see, like, in one moment how he could do anything better. And unfortunately, what he did ended up killing himself. Like, up until season 3, with the death, it's such a tragedy, but a beautiful tragedy. It's a beautiful tragedy because, you're right. Like, instead of him dying with this act, it could have been some act that he would not have died from. And then Billy and Max could have run off into the sunset together. But unfortunately, that's not the case. He died. However, he died doing something that saved his sister and her friends and doing something that was good for the world. So that's my takeaway. Like, that's the insight and the meaning behind the Billy and Max thing is, I don't think it's ever too late for redemption between brothers and sisters.
No, I think it's never too late. And I don't want to say that there was no redemption, because I definitely think there was. It just felt like to me that it was the step towards redemption. Season 4 might be my favorite when it comes to Max and Billy's relationship, even though Billy's already dead, because we see Max is completely falling apart. She's distraught. She can't sleep. Her mom is drinking, working 2 jobs, and she's very depressed, and she's traumatized over Billy's death. And I love the scene where she's at his gravestone and she's reading him the letter and she's explaining everything that happened after he passed away. And it really reveals, which is what one would expect, is that she hates the fact that she can't tell the world that he saved everybody, and she wishes she could tell people. And the biggest thing, which is you could guess, is that when Vecna starts coming from her, the fact that Billy, or technically Vecna through Billy, saying that Max wanted him to die and that she feels guilty. And at the very end of the season, that's what she tells Lucas in order to draw Vecna out, that she wished for Billy's death a lot. And so now that he has died, she feels guilt for feeling that way. And it was so well done, and it feels very realistic in terms of their relationship, how Billy's processing it, or how Max is processing it, because we understand why she feels that way.
But it's what you make of it. And unfortunately with her, she has no choice because Billy's gone, and there's like self-blame, and it's just tragic. It's tragic and sad.
Their dynamic is not purely just a sibling dynamic. It's also reflective of what happens in an abusive household as well. And what happens where the abuser dies. And this happens where the abuser is the parents and they pass away. And so many children that are dealing with that same emotion of feeling guilt because they secretly wanted their parent to die, of wishing that their parent lived so they could reconcile, so they could finally fix things. I was, during season 3, when I originally watched it, I was confused as to why Max cared so much about Billy, because from what we've seen, there's not been a single moment where Billy actually was even neutral to her, you know? I mean, of course, it's complicated when you grow up with someone who's abusive, but you also grew up with them, because you hope that you can fix things. And also with siblings, where it's like you both grow up in the same shit, you know, like Billy's the only other person that understands what their home was like. It's someone that she can relate to. Yeah, no, there is an added layer of siblings because of the growing up in the same terrible environment.
Abused by the same people. You have,
Abused by the
the
same
enemy
people.
of your enemy is your friend.
Right. And I think a part of that, yeah, and she wanted to have a brother, and she never got the brother that she wanted. And it's something she's never going to have. You know, the fact that she wanted him to die, which is very understandable, and feeling guilt for that is also very realistic. I have a lot of sympathy for Max in all the seasons when it comes to Billy. And I think that Billy is obviously to some extent also a sympathetic character, because we understand where his behavior comes from. I don't think that it excuses his behavior in any way, shape, or form, because you can't continue the cycle. But we got to see at least the fact that he had a core inside him that wanted to be good. She chooses also to risk her own life for everyone's safety.
She's trying to turn something bad into something good, which is really, really powerful. She's turning the death of her abusive brother and all of the problems having to do with that and dealing with that, grieving. It's a complicated grieving. Say, if only I could make a deal with God, I'd get him to swap our places and be running up that road, be running up that hill, no problems. Say if I only could make a deal with God, get him to swap our places, be running up that road, be running up that hill, no problems.